You sit in your room on a Friday night, while the world outside pulses with social activity, and you feel that familiar weight settle over you. Not loneliness exactly, but something more complicated. You are alone, and you chose this, and yet there is this persistent voice asking what is wrong with you. Your friends stopped inviting you out as often. Your family makes comments about how you are always in your head, always disappearing, always needing space. You have tried to explain that you are not avoiding life, that you do not hate people, that you simply need this. But how do you explain to someone that solitude is not deprivation for you? It is sustenance. How do you make them understand that the hours you spend alone are not empty but full, not escapist but deeply engaged with something real and necessary that has no name in the vocabulary of constant connection? You have wondered if maybe they are right, if maybe there is something fundamentally wrong with your need for aloneness. You have pushed yourself into social situations, forced yourself to be present, tried to become the kind of person who thrives in constant company. And it exhausted you. It felt like wearing someone else's skin. So you retreat again, back to your solitude, back to yourself, and the guilt comes with you. But what if I told you that what you are experiencing is not a deficiency, but a capacity? What if your solitude is not the problem, but the very source of something most people have lost access to entirely? Let me take you into a different understanding of what is happening when you are alone. Hannah Arendt, the philosopher who examined the human condition with rare precision, understood something about solitude that contradicts almost everything our culture tells us. She distinguished between three states of being that we often confuse: loneliness, isolation, and solitude. Loneliness is the painful sense of being cut off from human connection, the feeling that you are outside looking in at a world you cannot enter. Isolation is the condition of being separated from others while engaged in work or creation, a necessary distance that allows focus and productivity. But solitude, true solitude, is something entirely different. Solitude is the state in which you are with yourself, in which you enter into what Arendt called the two-in-one, the internal dialogue that constitutes thinking itself. When you are in solitude, you are not alone in the sense of being abandoned or cut off. You are in company with yourself. You are engaged in the most fundamental human activity, the examined life, the conversation between the thinking ego and the self that is being thought about. This is not withdrawal from reality. This is the space where reality becomes clear. Most people avoid solitude, not because they dislike their own company, but because they are terrified of it. They fill every silence with noise, every moment with distraction, every pause with the presence of others. They reach for their phones at the first hint of stillness. They turn on the television before the door closes behind them. They schedule themselves into exhaustion to avoid ever being alone with their thoughts. And here is what Arendt understood. This flight from solitude is actually a flight from thinking. When you are always in the presence of others, always performing your social self, always responding to external demands and expectations, you never have to face the questions that arise in genuine thinking. You never have to examine your own beliefs, interrogate your own assumptions, or confront the contradictions between what you say you value and how you actually live. The social world, with its constant demands for conformity and performance, protects you from self-knowledge. It allows you to live on the surface, to accept received opinions without examination, to be what Arendt called thoughtless. And thoughtlessness, she argued, is the condition that makes possible the banality of evil, the unexamined participation in systems and behaviors that contradict our own stated values. When you never think, when you never withdraw into solitude to examine your own mind, you become capable of anything because you are never really there to witness what you are doing. But you, sitting alone in your room on Friday night, you are not thoughtless. You are engaged in the essential human practice of thinking, even if you do not recognize it as such. When you withdraw from the social world, you are not escaping. You are creating the space where genuine thought becomes possible. You are entering into dialogue with yourself. And this is harder than it sounds because when you sit with yourself in true solitude, you discover that you are not one person, but two. There is the self that acts and speaks in the world, and there is the self that observes, questions, and judges. Arendt called this the two-in-one, this split in consciousness that occurs when you turn your attention inward. You become both the speaker and the listener, both the one who proposes an idea and the one who examines whether that idea holds up to scrutiny. This internal dialogue is what we call thinking, and it requires solitude because it cannot happen when you are performing for others, when you are busy maintaining your social persona, when you are responding to external demands for attention and presence. The moment someone else enters the room, the two in one collapses back into one. You stop thinking and start interacting. You stop examining and start performing. Now here is where this becomes difficult. Most people cannot bear the two in one. They cannot bear to sit with themselves and discover that they disagree with themselves, that they hold contradictory beliefs, that they are not as consistent or coherent as they believed. The internal dialogue reveals uncomfortable truths. It shows you where you are living in contradiction, where your actions do not match your stated values, where you are lying to yourself or others. This is why people flee from solitude. Not because being alone is inherently painful, but because thinking is uncomfortable. It destabilizes certainty, it introduces doubt. It forces you to question whether you are who you believe yourself to be. And so people choose the company of others, not because connection is always nourishing, but because the presence of others prevents this uncomfortable encounter with oneself. They choose distraction over examination, social performance over internal dialogue, the safety of received opinions over the risk of genuine thought. If this is resonating with something you have been feeling, something you have not quite been able to name, then consider staying with me as I continue to explore this territory. I create these videos for people who are not satisfied with surface explanations, who want to understand what is actually happening beneath the narratives we are given. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into these questions with me. Here is what I want you to understand about your solitude. Every time you have felt guilty for choosing to be alone, every time you have wondered what is wrong with you for not craving constant social connection, you are actually experiencing a conflict between your genuine need for thinking space and the cultural imperative that treats solitude as failure. We live in a society that has made connection the ultimate virtue and solitude the ultimate sin. We are told constantly that mental health means staying connected, that isolation is dangerous, that you must always be reaching out, always maintaining relationships, always present in the social sphere. And there is truth in the importance of connection. Genuine relationships matter, love matters, community matters. But what gets lost in this celebration of connection is the equally essential need for solitude, for the space where you can think, where you can examine your own mind, where you can be with yourself without the constant pressure to perform or please or maintain a social face. Your need for solitude is not antisocial, it is pre-social. It is the condition that makes authentic social interaction possible, because only when you have spent time in genuine self-examination can you show up in relationships as something other than a collection of performances and defenses. Think about the quality of your interactions when you have not had enough time alone versus when you have given yourself the solitude you need. When you are depleted from too much social contact, when you have not had space to think, you show up in relationships as a kind of ghost of yourself. You say the things you are supposed to say. You perform the appropriate reactions. You maintain the social script, but you are not really there. Your attention is fragmented. Your responses are automatic. You are exhausted from the effort of being someone for someone else. Now think about times when you have had sufficient solitude, when you have spent time in your own company, in genuine thinking. You come to social interactions refreshed. You have something to offer because you have been somewhere real. Your presence is not a performance but an actual encounter. You can listen because you are not busy maintaining your own facade. You can speak honestly because you have examined your own thoughts and know what you actually believe. This is the paradox. Solitude does not make you less capable of connection. It makes genuine connection possible. Without solitude, all you have is social performance, the endless theater of personas interacting with personas while no one is actually home. I know many of you watching this have been carrying guilt about your need for alone time, maybe for years. You have been told by well-meaning people that you need to push yourself more, get out there more, stop hiding. You have internalized the message that your solitude is somehow selfish or unhealthy. But here is what I want to ask you directly. When did you first realize that being alone felt different for you than it seemed to feel for others? When did you first notice that you actually needed this time, not as escape, but as something essential? I want you to share in the comments, not because I need the engagement, but because when you name this out loud, when you acknowledge that this is real for you, you break the isolation that comes from believing you are the only one who feels this away. And if articulating it feels too difficult right now, if you are still working through the guilt or shame of it, just type this. This is my experience too. Just those 5 words. Because when you do, you give permission for everyone else who is watching to see that they are not alone in this need for aloneness. Your honesty helps create space for others to stop apologizing for who they are. So comment below. Tell me about your relationship with solitude. I read every single one, and I promise what you are experiencing is not deficiency but depth. Now let us go deeper into what happens in solitude that cannot happen anywhere else. When you enter into genuine solitude, when you create the space for thinking, you engage in what Arendt called the dialogue of me with myself. This is not daydreaming or ruminating or planning. This is thinking in the philosophical sense, the rigorous examination of ideas, the testing of beliefs against experience, the questioning of assumptions. In thinking, you take an idea and turn it over in your mind. You examine it from different angles. You ask whether it holds up, whether it is consistent, whether you can live with its implications. You discover that you have opinions about your own thoughts. You find yourself agreeing or disagreeing with positions you yourself hold. This internal disagreement, this discovery that you are not unified but plural even within yourself, this is the essence of consciousness. And it can only happen in solitude, because the moment you are with others, the moment you enter the social world, this internal plurality collapses. You become one again. You present a unified self to the world. You cannot afford to appear contradictory or uncertain. You cannot show the messy process of thinking. You must have already thought. This is why people who spend time in genuine solitude often make others uncomfortable. When you have been thinking, when you have been examining ideas and beliefs and assumptions, you do not simply accept what everyone else accepts. You ask questions. You point out contradictions. You refuse to go along with things that do not make sense just because everyone else is going along with them. This makes you difficult. This makes you challenging to be around for people who have not examined their own beliefs. Because your questions force them to either think or to defend their thoughtlessness. And defending thoughtlessness is exhausting. It requires constant assertion without evidence, constant appeals to what everyone knows or what has always been done. People who have spent time in solitude, people who think, threaten the comfortable consensus that allows social life to proceed smoothly without constant examination. They interrupt the flow of received opinion. They slow down the rush to judgment. They insist on looking at things carefully, and this is experienced by others as antagonistic, even when you are simply trying to understand, even when you are asking genuine questions rather than making accusations. So here is the power that comes from solitude. When you spend time alone, when you engage in genuine thinking, you develop a capacity that most people lack. The capacity to disagree with yourself, to examine your own beliefs, to question your own certainties. This capacity is what Arendt believed prevented evil, or at least the particular form of evil that comes from thoughtlessness, from going along with what everyone else is doing without ever examining whether it is right. When you have established the habit of internal dialogue, when you have learned to sit with yourself in the two-in-one, you cannot simply accept what you are told to accept. You cannot participate in things that violate your own examined values, because you have to live with yourself. You have to face yourself in solitude, and if you are living in contradiction to your own understanding, that internal dialogue becomes unbearable. You cannot lie to yourself in the same way you can lie to others. In solitude, in the space of genuine thinking, you are accountable to yourself in a way that makes thoughtless action impossible. This is why solitude is power. Not because it makes you superior to others, not because it gives you special knowledge or insight that others lack, but because it gives you something even more essential, a relationship with yourself that cannot be disrupted by the opinions of others. When you have spent time in genuine solitude, when you have developed the habit of thinking, You are not as easily swayed by social pressure, not as vulnerable to manipulation, not as desperate for approval. You have an inner life that sustains you. You have a relationship with yourself that matters. You know what you think because you have examined your own thinking. You know what you value because you have tested your values against your experience. You are not just a collection of received opinions and social performances. You are someone who has sat with themselves, questioned themselves, and chosen who to be based on examination rather than conformity. But let me be clear about something. Solitude is not superiority. The person who spends time alone is not better than the person who prefers constant company. Solitude is not moral in itself. What matters is what you do in that solitude. If you use aloneness simply to avoid challenges, to escape discomfort, to hide from the world, then solitude becomes another form of thoughtlessness. It becomes isolation rather than genuine solitude. Arendt was clear about this. Genuine solitude requires that you are with yourself, that you engage in thinking, that you enter into internal dialogue. If you are alone but numb, alone but avoiding, alone but not actually present with yourself, then you are not in solitude. You are just isolated. And isolation is not power. It is disconnection. The power comes specifically from the thinking that happens in solitude, from the examined life, from the courage to face yourself and question yourself and live in the tension of your own internal plurality. So what does it actually look like to be in genuine solitude versus mere isolation? In genuine solitude, you are active even though you appear still. Your mind is engaged. You are thinking, questioning, examining. You might be reading and responding to what you read. You might be writing and discovering what you think through the act of writing. You might be sitting quietly, but following a train of thought to its conclusion, testing an idea against your experience, examining a belief to see if it holds up. This is not passive. This is not spacing out or numbing or distracting yourself from difficult feelings. This is the most active thing you can do, because thinking requires the full engagement of consciousness. In thinking, you are both actor and audience, both speaker and listener, both the one who questions and the one who attempts to answer. You are present with yourself in a way that demands complete attention. This is why genuine solitude is actually exhausting, not in the way that social performance is exhausting, not from the effort of maintaining a facade, but from the intensity of being fully present with yourself, from the rigor of examining your own thinking without the escape that social distraction provides. In contrast, isolation is passive. In isolation, you are alone, but you are not with yourself. You are scrolling mindlessly through social media. You are binge-watching shows without really seeing them. You are numbing yourself with substances or food or sleep or anything that prevents you from having to be present with your own mind. Isolation is what happens when you are alone but terrified of solitude, when you use aloneness as avoidance rather than engagement. And this is important to understand because many people who desperately need solitude are instead experiencing isolation, and they cannot understand why being alone does not help, why they still feel empty and disconnected and lost even though they have withdrawn from social contact. The answer is that they have withdrawn from others, but not into themselves. They have created aloneness, but not solitude. They are isolated rather than in genuine company with themselves. So the question becomes, how do you cultivate genuine solitude? How do you move from isolation to the kind of aloneness that Arendt understood as essential to thinking and to human dignity? It starts with the simple practice of being present with yourself without distraction. This does not mean you must meditate or follow any particular spiritual practice, though those can be helpful. It means you must be willing to sit with your own mind, to let thoughts arise without immediately reaching for something to make them go away. It means you must develop the capacity to be bored, to be uncomfortable, to be uncertain, without immediately filling that space with noise or activity, or the presence of others. Because thinking begins in that space of discomfort, in the gap between stimulus and response, in the moment when you do not immediately know what you think and must actually examine the question. If you are always consuming content, always engaged with external stimulation, always responding to others, you never create the space where genuine thinking can occur. You remain on the surface, reacting rather than examining, performing rather than being. What you are cultivating in solitude is not knowledge but wisdom. You are not accumulating information. You are developing understanding. You are learning to know yourself, not in the therapeutic sense of mining your past for trauma or patterns, though that can be part of it, but in the philosophical sense of examining your own mind, witnessing your own thinking, becoming conscious of your own consciousness. This self-knowledge is not narcissistic. It is not about being obsessed with yourself or believing you are special. It is about being honest with yourself, about seeing clearly what you actually think and value and believe beneath all the layers of social conditioning and performance. And this honesty with yourself, this willingness to see yourself as you are rather than as you wish to be or as others expect you to be, this is what creates the foundation for genuine power. Because you cannot be manipulated if you know yourself. You cannot be sold illusions if you have examined your own desires. You cannot be swept up in group thinking if you have established the habit of thinking for yourself. Now I want to speak directly to those of you who have been defending your need for solitude but feeling guilty about it, who have been trying to explain to others why you need this time alone, who have been treated as if your solitude is a problem to be solved. If what I am sharing here is opening something up for you, if you are recognizing that what you have been experiencing is not deficiency, but a genuine human capacity that others have lost or never developed, then I want to invite you to be part of this community of thinkers. I create these videos for people who are ready to go deeper, who are not satisfied with surface explanations, who want to understand the human condition with rigor and honesty. If that is you, consider subscribing. Not because you need another channel to follow, but because this journey of understanding, this practice of thinking deeply about what it means to be human, it helps to have companions along the way. People who will not offer you easy answers, but will explore the questions with you. People who understand that solitude is not antisocial but essential. I am here every week with another exploration, another examination of the ideas that shape how we understand ourselves and our lives. And I would be honored to have you here as part of this community of people who think. So if this feels right, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what your relationship with solitude has been. What have you discovered in those hours alone? What has thinking given you that social connection could not? Your reflections help deepen the exploration for all of us. Let me return now to where we began. You sitting alone on Friday night, feeling that weight of guilt and confusion about your need for solitude. What if you could return to that moment with the understanding that what you are doing is not escape but engagement? What if you understood that the hours you spend alone are not wasted but essential, not time stolen from life, but time spent in the most fundamentally human activity? What if you recognize that your discomfort with constant social contact is not social anxiety or misanthropy, but a legitimate need for the space where thinking happens, where you can be with yourself without performance, where you can examine your own mind without the pressure to conform to others' expectations of who you should be? The guilt you feel is not your own. It is the voice of a culture that has forgotten the value of solitude, that has mistaken constant connection for genuine relationship, that has confused social performance with authentic presence. That guilt is trying to make you smaller, trying to convince you that your need for thinking space is a problem rather than a capacity. But you do not have to accept that verdict. Here is what I have learned from spending years examining these questions, from sitting with Arendt's ideas and testing them against experience. The people who have genuine power, not power over others, but power with themselves, are almost always people who have cultivated a relationship with solitude. They have learned to be with themselves. They have developed the capacity for internal dialogue. They think, and because they think, they are not easily manipulated or controlled or swept up in groupthink. They know what they believe because they have examined their beliefs. They know what matters to them because they have questioned their values. They are not performing a self for others. They have a self that exists independent of others' approval or recognition. And this makes them dangerous to systems that depend on conformity, but it also makes them fully human in a way that thoughtless activity never can. Your solitude is not something to apologize for or explain or defend. It is your birthright as a thinking being. It is the space where you become conscious, where you examine your life, where you develop the relationship with yourself that makes all other relationships possible. The hours you spend alone are not hours stolen from connection. They are hours invested in becoming someone capable of genuine connection, someone who shows up in relationships as a presence rather than a performance, someone who can listen because they have heard themselves, someone who can speak honestly because they have examined their own thoughts. Your solitude makes you more capable of love, not less, because you have someone to bring to the encounter. You are not just a collection of reactions and performances. You are someone who has been with themselves, who knows themselves, who has something real to offer. So when the guilt comes, when the voices tell you that you should be more social, more available, more present in the world of others, remember what you are actually doing in those hours alone. You are thinking. You are being with yourself. You are engaging in the activity that makes you human, rather than simply reactive. You are cultivating the capacity for examined life, for genuine choice, for freedom from the tyranny of received opinion and social pressure. You are becoming someone who knows what they think because they have thought about it, someone who knows what they value because they have examined it, someone who can live with integrity because they have to face themselves in solitude. This is not escape. This is not weakness. This is not failure to be properly social. This is power. The power to know yourself, the power to think for yourself, the power to live as someone who has examined their own life and chosen how to be in the world. Your solitude is not the problem. Your solitude is the answer to a question you have been asking without words. How do I become real? How do I live with integrity? How do I know what I actually believe? The answer is here, in these hours alone, in this space of thinking, in this relationship with yourself that no one else can give you and no one else can take away. So stop apologizing. Stop explaining. Stop defending your need for what is most essentially human. Take your solitude. Protect it. Use it. And become who you are through the courageous act of being with yourself.